Good evening, everyone. I welcome all the attendees present here for today's interview on behalf of the Junior Science Club. So today we have with us Dr. Baland Jalal, who is a neuroscientist and psychology researcher at Cambridge University. And he's going to speak about various aspects of neuroscience and psychology with a special focus on dreams, sleep, and disorders related to sleep. Now I hand it over to you, Aditi.
Yeah, so I will be talking about the speaker for the day, Dr. Balan Jalal. Dr. Balan Jalal is a researcher at the Department of Psychiatry, Cambridge University. He obtained his PhD at the Cambridge University in the School of Clinical Medicine and was a fellow at Harvard University. He has published over 45 papers, is a co-author to a book titled Diagnostic Multiplex CBT for Muslim Cultural Groups. Dr. Jalal's research focuses on neuroplasticity, neuropsychiatry, including sleep paralysis and OCD. He has done research on sleep paralysis around the world. He designed one of the first treatments for sleep paralysis, which was meditation relaxation therapy with V.S. Ramachandran, Richard J., and his colleagues. He proposed the use of rubber hand illusion for treatment of OCD as well. He's considered to be one of the world's leading experts on sleep paralysis, and he has given lectures at Harvard and all the other top places on social media. And he has also written and been a part of New York Times, the Washington Post, the Today Show, BCC, etc. His writing has appeared in Big Think and Scientific American, and his recent essay featured on the cover of Boston Globe. So, without a further ado, let's get started.
Hello, DG. How are you? Very nice to be with you.
Thank you so much, sir.
I always enjoy chatting with you, so I hope we'll have an interesting chat here. So
Definitely, sir. I hand over the session to Anindya, my friend, to start. Please go ahead, Anindya.
Okay, so we'll begin with the session. Okay, so first of all, I'd just like to say it's been a real pleasure to have you here with us in this talk, and also that the fact that the research topic that you actually give research on, right, about sleep paralysis. So it's a really fascinating and unique topic actually, and you're one of the names who is like most associated with this topic. So first, we actually like to begin this talk. I just want to ask that. So, what exactly made you want to study sleep paralysis in general?
very good question. Excuse me, I got some water. So I started studying sleep paralysis when I was a teenager out of high school. And I was sleeping in my bed, and I realized, my God, I'm actually paralyzed, unable to move or speak. Right. And during this episode, things were very weird. I mean, imagine like just being awake, but being unable to move or speak, and just kind of being around, so aware of your surroundings and things like that. And then I felt like some creature was on my chest, pressing on my chest. And there was I felt like there was kind of a ghost present in my bedroom. And I was like, what is this about? Like, why am I paralyzed? Why do I sense there's a ghost here? And then I saw my legs, going up and down, flying up and down, like being pulled up and down. I thought, okay, now it's really bad. Where's this going? And then, I felt like the creature was on my chest, choking me and about to kill me. And I woke up from that. I was totally, transformed. I felt like I'd had some encounter with supernatural entities. And this put me on a long journey to sort of study this. My first reaction was like, do I go to Google? I went to Google. I, went on the internet. I, just to look up, like I saw a ghost. What happens if you see a ghost in your sleep and things like that? And yeah, so that happened to me. And, when you find yourself in one of these situations, it's kind of unclear. Like, do you go tell your parents, like, mom, dad, I saw a ghost? Like, what would you do, right? It's very hard to sort of deal with a situation like that. So yeah, it was quite the experience, and so, but I had to sort of unravel, like, why did I see ghosts? Like, why was I paralyzed? And so this really put me on this journey to study sleep paralysis around the world and trying to understand, like, why am I paralyzed waking up? Why do I see ghosts in my bedroom? And it turned out to be one of the most fascinating phenomena in the entirety of medicine, the sleep paralysis phenomenon that hopefully we can, go into.
Yeah, that's a great a place to start. And let's discuss about sleep paralysis in detail. So, what
Mhm.
exactly happens in sleep paralysis, and how is it different from narcolepsy? There are researchers which properly say that people who are prone to narcolepsy also undergo the experiences of sleep paralysis. So, please tell us more about it.
Yeah, so narcolepsy is a rare sleep disorder, and the way to understand narcolepsy is that it's basically if you have narcolepsy, you might fall asleep suddenly when you. If I fall, I usually say if I give a lecture and you fall asleep, well then that's on you. But if I, the lecturer, fall asleep while giving the lecture, I might have narcolepsy. So narcolepsy is this thing where you go about your daily life, but then suddenly you might, fall asleep suddenly while, walking in the park or lecturing or whatever you're doing. So it's a really interesting, but it's a rare disorder. And one of the symptoms of narcolepsy is, in fact, having frequent sleep paralysis. Now, there's the certain hormones and brain chemicals involved in narcolepsy. Orexin, there's a breakdown of the orexin and things like that. So it's a very organic sleep disorder. Whereas sleep paralysis, that's just the most common, manifestation of sleep paralysis, is that it's fairly common. So you have about 20% of people have these episodes of at least once in a lifetime where they are wake up paralyzed, unable to move or speak, and then in about 40% of cases you will have these hallucinations of ghosts and things like that. So, in short, sleep paralysis is a common phenomenon. It happens to a lot of people, and you're paralyzed, unable to move or speak, and hallucinate. Whereas narcolepsy is this rare sleep, organic sleep disorder where sleep paralysis can, occur as a key symptom. So that's where I would, differentiate between the two. Does that make sense, Aditi?
Yes, sir,
What do
it
you?
does. It does. So,
Yeah.
is that yes, sir? So, I was thinking that how, as you mentioned, that it's very common. Can it happen
Mhm.
to anybody? Can sleep paralysis happen to anyone? And does someone need to have a medical history of mental disorders? And does going through sleep paralysis indicate of a underlying illness, or is it so common that people need not fear it at all?
Yeah. So, what is the cause of sleep paralysis? First of all, like, why would you wake up, unable to move or speak? So, let's, answer that question. Well, sleep paralysis occurs. It emerges out of something called Rem sleep. So, each one of us, each night, goes through various unique stages of sleep. Going from stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? And the fifth stage of sleep is Rem sleep. All right. So during Rem sleep, during rapid eye movement sleep, you have lifelike, crisp dreams. These are the dreams when you find yourself on the moon, wrestling with an alligator, or having tea with the queen, or playing soccer for Liverpool. Everything is just mixed, warped, time, places, people. Everything is messed up. These are Rem dreams. Now your brain is clever. It has certain mechanisms in the back of your brain, the pons and the medulla, right, in the lower part of the brain. This part of the brain tells your body, look, buddy, be paralyzed so you don't act out these dreams and hurt yourself. It's a very clever survival mechanism. Otherwise, I would just be hurting my sleeping partner. I'd be going all over the place, right? So you're paralyzed during Rem sleep. Now, occasionally, for some reason that's unknown, you might wake up prematurely while you are sleeping and dreaming in Rem, right? While you are in this Rem stage of sleep. And what happens is, think of it as there are two systems. There's a wakefulness system, which is the cortical regions of the brain. These are the wakefulness centers of the brain, mainly the frontal, but the cortex, right? And that part of the brain can prematurely activate. Like there's a light switch that goes, you can switch it, turn it on and off, and when you turn it on, you wake up. And if this light switch is turned on prematurely and you start waking up, even though you're physiologically in Rem paralyzed, well, then you have sleep paralysis. You have the dreaming sleep Rem world colliding with the wakefulness world. And when you have these class of civilizations or worlds, that's when sleep paralysis happens. And then when you're lying there paralyzed and waking up, obviously the aspects of the dream world will spill over into waking consciousness, right? Almost like augmented reality. Augmented reality? When you take all these goggles and you have like 3D projection into sort of your life. Sort of like that, right? It's almost like you're seeing the real world from a lens of dreaming. and all that, dreammentation, we call it, can spill over and color and taint your world. So that's what sleep paralysis is. It's this clash of worlds. Now, why does this uncoupling happen where you wake up prematurely? It's unclear. We don't know really as scientists, but the brain has these quirks. Occasionally you might have wakefulness occur at various times that doesn't match with your dream states and all that. So that's just more of like a glitch in the system, but it leads to this unique state of consciousness. Now, sleep paralysis, it seems to be associated with the genes that are linked to the sleep-wake cycle, which makes sense because the sleep-wake cycle is responsible for when you're tired and want to be sleeping and things like that. And so if those genes are sort of out of whack or not, have some defect, there's some, mutation on those genes, then you may be more likely to experience sleep paralysis. In fact, when you travel or have sort of disjointed sleep from stress or anxiety or from drugs and alcohol, you're more likely to have sleep paralysis. In fact, Aditi, did you know if you have anxiety and stress and things like that, things that fragment your sleep, you're more likely to have sleep paralysis as well. Your brain is more likely to tilt you into sleep paralysis. But we can go into that. But so yes, the sleep paralysis tends to be more common in people with anxiety and stress and PTSD and things like that. In psychiatric conditions where sleep is sort of not completely cohesive and robust, where sleep is a bit wacky, and then that's when you experience sleep paralysis more frequently. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So coming back to my question, so it kind of answers that since anyone can have anxiety and stress disorders, same way anyone can have sleep paralysis as well.
So sleep paralysis, it affects about 20% of the population. So if you sample 100 people, randomly, about 20 people will had it at least once in their lifetime. Now, so it does affect about 20% at least once. But it does tend to also run in families. So there's this genetic component I mentioned with the sleep-wake cycle, genes, these genes being affected. So the genetic component seems to be there. And then there seems to be some kind of cultural component. We can get into that. That's really fun because it seems like if you interpret sleep paralysis in certain cultural filters, like if Aditi, in your culture, sleep paralysis is this terrifying ghost that comes and chokes you and attack you, then you can build sort of an anxiety and fear around it, which makes you more likely to have sleep paralysis as a chronic thing, you see. So culture can color it, culture can impact sleep paralysis.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
Very good.
So could we say that like sleep paralysis is usually accompanied by vivid hallucinations?
Yeah, so sleep paralysis does come with these vivid hallucinations. And to be frank, Anindya, is it correctly pronounced?
Yes.
Anindya. So yes, they have these weird hallucinations, right? And this is what's so striking about the whole thing is that, you wake up there paralyzed, which is terrifying in its own right, being paralyzed, waking up, being unable to move or speak. For most people, that equates, I'm about to die, what's happening, right? Why am I, I can't move, right? But then you have these hallucinations where, occasionally you might see a copy of yourself, like Baland might see himself floating out in space. I've seen a copy of myself, in fact, having an out-of-body experience. So you see yourself out there, floating out there in space. Or occasionally it's the ghost, right? So it's a demon that's in front of you wanting to kill you, or it could be a tiger even, or it can be like an alien, space alien that's coming to attack you and choke you and do various things to you. So these hallucinations are very, very unique and peculiar. But I want to go to sort of the interest. So okay, first of all, let's ask ourselves the question: why might you hallucinate during sleep paralysis? So that's, as a scientist, let's ask ourselves that question. Well, it turns out potentially, and this is a theory that we have postulated with Ramachandran that you mentioned, is that when you are paralyzed, okay, during REM sleep, we mentioned that you had a system in your brain that's paralyzing you, right? Glycine and GABA, these neurotransmitters, inhibitory paralyzes you during the REM stage. Okay, so we have that. And then you're waking up, consciously becoming aware of your surroundings. Now, what might be going on then? How might you react to this? Well, how would you react to DT if you woke up suddenly and paralyzed? What would you tell yourself?
I would actually, I had actually gone through an experience of sleep paralysis. So I was like having an experience, I was having an allergy and I was drugged. I was having an anti-allergy and some paracetamol. So while after a afternoon nap, when I wake up, I find myself looking at myself. I can look around in the room, but I can't move. So where I quietly patiently wait to see what's happening, and after a minute or so I can feel like a mechanical shift in my head where I can like feel myself getting back to the powers of being able to move my limbs again, and then I get back to reality.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, that's a very common thing. The kind of experience you mentioned, it's very common. Very thanks for sharing. And I think there's a lot of different scenarios, obviously, right? So if you find yourself paralyzed, some people are just more calm and things like that. But for a great preponderance of people, for a great percentage, the knee-jerk reaction is, let me get the hell out of here, okay? I'm paralyzed, I can't move, and the brain goes into this sort of alarm state. Let me just flee, all right? And so when you try to flee, obviously the amygdala, the emotional fear parts of the brain will flare up, all right? So these will become hyperactive, they'd be, very reactive. And then what happens is you would most likely send commands from your motor neurons to your body, say, Baland, move, get out of here, get out of here, move, right? But then, all right, what happens is normally in a wakeful person, in order to build a sense of a body image, and now, by the way, I'll become slightly technical on you here, but bear with me. When you are trying to build a sense of an I, a sense of a DT or Baland, when you send commands to like move like that, like move, what normally happens, your legs and your arms would send feedback back to the parietal regions of the brain saying, look, buddy, create a sense of Baland based on the information that is now returning from my physical body, from my limbs, from my skin, from my muscles, from my joints. All that information goes back and says, look, Baland is out here in space. His arm is out here. His leg is out here, you see? So it builds the sense of a self, right? That sense of we all have of a self is created in that part of the brain, in the superior parietal lobule, the temporal parietal junction, regions up here. You see, these are very important for building a sense of an I, a sense of a coherent sense of a unified self. Does that make sense? But during sleep paralysis, that information, that critical key information is lacking from your body because you are paralyzed. There is no information going back to your parietal lobes. So your parietal lobes, and this is a key principle in neuroscience, is that your brain abhors, it dreads, it dislikes any incongruent situation, and so it will fill in the blank for you and say, the hell with it, Baland's arm is out here, or his leg is out here, or his entire self is shifted out there. It sort of goes into this weird state where it creates a sense of a self for you based on its predictions or of what it thinks it might look like. All right, does that make sense? So you have this incongruent, these conflicts of sensory inputs and lack of feedback, and this lack of feedback is called deafferentation. Okay, deafferentation, lack of feedback is missing, and so you might hallucinate these legs and arms. And in fact, you will, in many cases, including myself. I mentioned in the beginning of this episode that I saw my legs going up and down. Can you see why that makes sense now? Because that's one of the hallucinations. Your sense of self is all shifted, and then if you see yourself out there, obviously that's a copy of you. That's a copy of you. And the dilemma and the topic of discussion is usually, who's the real me, Baland here or that one up there? You see, there's a conflict of agency because you want to project agency here, but also out there. Is this an exogenous creature and all that, right? So there's this conflict. So we think that, your sense of self is, your body image is projected out in space. And then obviously because of fear, because of imagination, because of memory centers being active, you say, okay, based on all my previous information in the past, whenever I saw a shadow like that, it was really a intruder. It was a different a human or a ghost that, it's not really just an hallucination. Does that make sense, or am I losing you here?
No, no, it does. It
It
completely
does.
makes
It
sense.
does make
Yes.
sense. Yeah.
Okay. The short story is just basically what it is that your sense of self is disturbed. Your body image is disturbed, so it no longer as tightly bound to your body. It's projected out there, and then you project agency, intentions, and all that into it, and it becomes a separate creature that is culturally relevant. So if you are in a place where you believe in witches, then it's a witch, and then you add those details to the hallucination. So that's sort of the idea.
Okay, so sir, when you say that sleep paralysis is something which is affected by culture,
Mhm.
what's its relation when we take other factors in consideration, like gender, especially?
Yeah, so the gender variable, we have looked a bit, we have that data, but it hasn't been completely clear. But my prediction is that it would be more common in females. And the reason is that a lot of these mental disorders like anxiety and depression and things like that are more common in females. Yeah, so my prediction is, and then we might have some data, but it's not completely clear yet. But there might certainly be a gender difference. I would predict it, but more research needs to be done on this, or at least we have to analyze the data more carefully and publish this. So that's a good question.
Okay, sir. So I wanted to ask about how research actually takes place for sleep paralysis, because we don't really know if the patient is going to undergo an experience, so we can't really predict and put them under brain scans.
Yeah.
And so, what is the methodology of your research in your lab? How do you examine patients?
Well, so the work that we've been doing with my colleagues and things like that has been mainly field work. So we've been doing interviews, intense interviews with people with sleep paralysis, sitting down with them and discussing what sleep paralysis is, what it means, and things like that. So it's these questionnaire type style that we've used, and you're right. It's because sleep paralysis is very hard to study in the scanner or something like that. So that's been the preferred method, but we're hoping, of course, to change that very soon. Yep, we are
So,
hoping to change that very soon. Very soon. Can you hear me?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Excellent, excellent.
So these self-report measures that are being taken from clients, so does this entail the fact that if so I'm asking, let us say, a patient that, okay, so you described to me your experience of sleep paralysis, and
Mhm.
somewhere do we have to like compile all of these results and see the commonalities in the symptoms of what sleep paralysis exactly is?
Yeah. So what you would do is that you would do some kind of analysis of the data. You would look at commonalities across groups, or you might compare groups, right? So you might look at one group in, let's say, Egypt, and we in fact done this. We looked at Egypt, and we compared Egyptians to Danish people, and we said, how is sleep paralysis understood in these countries? Like, what are the cultural explanations for it? How is it associated with fear? Does it manifest differently in various cultures? So we do these kinds of analysis and looking at these populations. You want to hear about the study? The
Yeah.
Egyptian Danish study is that's why I mentioned it's a very fascinating study. So goes back to the whole cultural part of my work. And so we did look at Egypt and Denmark. And the reason we did one of those early studies now, maybe close to 10 years ago, was or in fact, maybe over 10 years, but we wanted to see in a country like Egypt, where people are more spiritual and spiritually inclined, sort of like India, right? Would people be more likely to add those cultural beliefs into the to the experience? Would they link their, say sleep paralysis is in fact this or that creature with a deep spiritual significance, versus a place like Denmark where I grew up, where people are more typically more less spiritually inclined, or less sort of, there are less these sort of religious narratives in this respect, and people are just less spiritual and religious overall. I mean, I think that's fair to say. So we have these two contrasting cultures. And it turned out that sleep paralysis in Egypt, in the Egyptian context, is, first of all, it's feared much more. So it's greatly feared. And you have like, maybe it's not 90%, 95% that it will say it's caused by the genies. So have you seen the cartoon Aladdin?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
The evil genie, not the good genie, the evil one. So it's like the evil genies that attacks you, chokes you, strangle you, and can potentially even kill you. So these are the beings causing sleep paralysis in Egypt. Okay, so people are terrified. You have 50% of people saying, I might die from sleep paralysis. All right. So you have that, and then we saw, okay, well, not only that, compared to Denmark, where most people will say, no, it's just your brain, it's just stress, it's just anxiety. You don't have that fear, you don't have that anxiety, you don't have that sort of, it's not linked to this sort of terror and dread in that way. So it's completely conceptualized completely differently in that regard. But not only that, it turns out then that the sleep paralysis episode is perceived to last much longer, right? So in Egypt, people will say, no, it lasts significantly longer than the Danish sleep paralysis episodes. And people will have it 3 times more often, in Egypt compared to Denmark. So if you're an Egyptian with sleep paralysis, and most likely you'd say it's a genie, then it turns out you have it 3 times more frequently than a Danish person with sleep paralysis. Okay, is that clear? And also, if you just live in Egypt, you're twice as likely to have sleep paralysis in your life compared to a Danish person. So it seems like sleep paralysis is completely changed, or the nature of it, the phenomenology and the experiences sort of changed, and there's some mind-body interaction going on of great importance, of certainly interesting character here. And so what might be going on? Now, we did some further studies in Italy, and we sort of found a similar pattern. In Italy, in the Abruzzo region, sleep paralysis is understood as the Pandafica witch. It's a witch. It's and it's like cats and things like that, giant cats that can do all kinds of things to you. And we found a similar pattern in Italy, of that region, where people would, have a long sleep paralysis, and they would have it very frequently, and they would fear it greatly, and all that. So sort of like the Egyptian, thing, you see, with the culture making the experience change. So what might be going on, right? I usually illustrate this using the Little Lisa example. So use the example of a Little Lisa. Little Lisa, it's a little story to illustrate what we think might be going on in the brain, all right? Now, I'm gonna have some water here. Now, imagine if your name, this girl called Little Lisa. She lives on this fictitious island somewhere far away. And people in this place have these cultural ideas for what sleep paralysis is, right? So they will say sleep paralysis is, these ghosts. It looks like this and that, So there's a clear cultural narrative and tradition around it. Now, when little Lisa is having dinner with her grandmother will tell her, be careful, the boogeyman will come at night, attack you, choke you, do all these things to you. Now, little Lisa is terrified, she's scared, and she goes to bed, and she experiences sleep paralysis for the first time in her life, right? So in her entire life, she's never had sleep paralysis, not even once, okay? Her grandmother tells her this story, all right, these stories about the boogeyman, and she experiences sleep paralysis. But not only that, she sees exactly that monster that her grandmother was talking about. It looks exactly like that monster, and she sees that exact monster. She wakes up the next day, and she has it again. And then 3 or 4 days later, she has it again. And it just keeps multiplying, and she has it more frequently. Now she has like 2 or 3 episodes per night, and it's becoming chronic. And she, goes tells her friends about it in school. She said, "Oh my God, this boogeyman comes at night. They have sleep paralysis, and they start also having sleep paralysis now. You see, so it's spreading. It's spreading like that. And then little Lisa, a month later, she's developed anxiety, and depression potentially, maybe even PTSD from this, from these repeated ghost visits. All right. Is that clear? Now the question is why? What's going on? Why would this happen?
Something like lucid dreaming, which is happening where she's like inducing herself to dream about this?
It's kind of similar. So it's definitely along those lines. It's like the nocebo effect, we believe. The nocebo. So you have the placebo. I give you a sugar pill. I said, DT, you'll take the sugar pill now, and you'll become extremely good at basketball, just like the Space Jam cartoon. So I give you this sugar pill, you become extremely talented. And the reason is, I tell you this is not a sugar pill. This is actually some magic potion or something, right? So this is the placebo. You expect something good actually happens. And it can happen for your body as well. So, you take a pill expecting to work wonders, and you see healing occur. Now you have the opposite, which is the nocebo effect, which is the placebo's evil twin, all right? Is his evil twin brother, is that when you expect something negative, all right, and then you take a sugar pill and you think you're going to die from it, and it's just sugar, you actually, react to it. You expect negative things, and negative things happen. This is known as mind-body interaction. You know this. In India, you surely would know this. All right. So little Lisa, she expects the demon to come. So she's primed, which we call cultural priming. She's expecting something to come and hold her body down and, press on her chest and all that, do all these things to her. She's expecting that. So she will start when sleeping in Rem sleep. We talked about Rem, right? She's sort of monitoring unconsciously her body and any movement in her body of anything holding her down. And then when she actually tries to move at some point, just checking if she's actually something is on her, she will, in a conformatory manner, wake herself up, and then, oh my God, I can't move, even though it's actually herself over surveying her bodily sensations in the Rem stage, where she is in fact paralyzed, but she doesn't think about that. You see, she thinks it's something holding her down, so she wakes herself up. Okay, next, what occurs is that she will try to move and escape the attack, causing body image disturbances. She sees a ghost. Now memory, and we talked about imagination, takes over. The dream parts of the brain will color this experience. Now she sees that ghost, the boogeyman of her culture, all right? She sees that. And then she's terrified. She wakes up. She thinks, my God, I'm being attacked by the spiritual being. And then she says, and then she has it more because, I mentioned, by the way, if you have anxiety and, actually mentioned this, if you have anxiety and stress, you're more likely to have sleep paralysis. Now, little Lisa, she would obviously have experienced a lot of anxiety from her grandmother's story, causing her brain to more likely to wake her up during the Rem stage and cause her to have sleep paralysis. So that's another factor. She had anxiety and stress causing her to become partly wakeful during the Rem stage. All right. So you have these various factors. She wakes up and she's anxious now, even more anxious than the first night, because now she experiences sleep paralysis. 3 or 4 days later, she has more anxiety, more stress, because this is keep happening. And then, it becomes more and more frequent. And a month later, she might even develop anxiety. She goes, my God, this is personal. This is a personal attack. I'm being possessed by this ghost. And then, as I mentioned, she would tell other people who would have similar experiences. So like a virus, it would just kind of spread. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
we can say that, right? It's like these manifestation of especially negative emotions coupled with negative cultural archetypes that are usually very unique to each culture. So these basically are like I'm voluntarily inducing sleep paralysis in myself. I'm
It's almost
fooling
like
my brain in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like you're involuntarily sort of, inducing it. So the 3 factors I mentioned, just to be clear, one is little Lisa had anxiety and stress from her grandmother. So that's the first thing causing her to have sleep paralysis. Second, she was surveying her body for paralysis sensations, and then acting in a conformatory manner. That's the second factor. And then the third was she would project the cultural ideas into it. So when she then hallucinates, it will fit with the cultural narrative, the archetype that you mentioned, right? The socio-cultural framework for what sleep paralysis is would then define what she would see. So these are some of the factors we think is going on, and it's quite exciting, in fact. Well, exciting in the negative way. It shows you how the brain works, obviously, potentially, right? It shows you how your mind can affect you and even lead you to have psychopathology, which is interesting, isn't it, Aditi? I mean, think about it.
Yes.
My God, you're sleeping in your bed, which should be the safest things of all things. Now you're causing yourself to see this ghost and then causing you to have like a mental disorder, possibly, weeks down the road, months down the road. So it shows you how the brain works and how it, how mysterious it is, like that it's so can be affected in these manners. And so, yeah, definitely.
Yes, sleep paralysis, it seems like it can answer much bigger questions. It can, because it's a very, it's a junction between consciousness and sleep, and it can also answer questions related to mind-body issues. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, a study on sleep paralysis is going to be a way to answer these bigger questions as well.
100%. Like it shows you how the brain works. I mean, they have my colleague over in Boston. He's done studies looking at people who thought they were abducted by aliens, and when they listen to their encounters of these alien abductions, which are in fact occurring during a sleep paralysis-like state, they will react physiologically to their own stories of these experiences that are comparable to people with PTSD. So they will show comparable PTSD-like reactions, showing that you can have potential, trauma coming out of this. It has that, profound effect on certain people, and they can build up. So you can have like one sleep paralysis representing one small trauma potentially, but then you have a lot of these, and they build up over time, and you might have a major trauma or emerging from this.
Okay, sir. So let's talk about your method of treatment of sleep paralysis, which you have come up with, which is meditation relaxation technique. Are there other medications which can be given to a patient who's reporting sleep paralysis over and over, or is it a psychiatric disease and you can solve it only by psychiatric therapy?
So it's a good question. How do you treat sleep paralysis? And so what a lot of clinicians are resorting to these days are SSRIs, are medications that work on the serotonin system, which is unsurprising in a way. The serotonin system is very much important for sleep. As we know, serotonin producing neurons turn off during the Rem stage of sleep, and it's just so people, what they will do is, and of course it's involved in anxiety, it's serotonin and all that. So it's been used as a treatment or as a way of sort of having people to cope with it, to use SSRIs. But really my treatment or my method that I've developed is a different one. And it was based on my cultural work. And it was like, I was thinking, is it possible to change the sleep paralysis, experience by sort of thinking yourself out of it or doing certain things that we think might work. So what are these things? So what can you do? So first of all, it's a direct treatment for sleep paralysis. So that's important to mention, meaning you're applying certain steps or, certain techniques during the experience itself. So you would be lying there paralyzed, unable to move or speak. And then what you would do as a first thing is that you want to take out the punch of sleep paralysis. It makes sense, right? Because you have all this fear and panic, descending upon you. You want to escape that. You want the person, the patient, to be less sort of reactive to that. So you have that first thing that you do is sort of reinterpreting what sleep paralysis means. So you tell yourself, okay, sleep paralysis is not it's not a ghost. It's common around the world. I'm not going to die from this, and you essentially take out the panic. So that's the first thing. And that's called cognitive reappraisal. That's a fancy term for that. And then you do another step, which is called emotional and psychological distancing. You say, well, given the fact that I'm not going to die and this is common around the world, that in fact is probably not a ghost, it's just, my brain, then what you can do is you can say, well, then I'm going to psychologically and emotionally distance myself from this. It doesn't matter if I'm, anxious and worried. It's not going to change anything. So I'm going to sort of, dissociate from it and just let sleep paralysis be what it is. And I'm just going to have this dissociation from it. I'm not going to be psychologically terrorized by it. Is that clear? So that's the second step. Now, the third critical step that you would do during the sleep paralysis episode, which is sort of the key of all this, you would say the following, or you would do the following. You would put all your attention on a positive object, emotional salient event or object, and you would sort of focus in on it like in an intense and focused manner. This is known as a focused attention meditation. And the trick here is really that, your brain has limited attentional abilities or capabilities or capacities, meaning that your attentional systems in your brain, they can only attend to so many things at one time. Have you seen that, that bear, where these guys are playing basketball and there's this bear breakdancing in the background, and then people will not,
I have.
Baseballs. It shows you how insanely, attention is very selective. It's called selective attention, right? So in that way, we are trying to recruit your attentional centers towards something extremely emotionally engaging. So you focus in on something spiritually significant, like a prayer or your mother's face or whatever, is important to you as a person. You focus in on that, and you engage with it and think about it in a very focused manner. In that way, distracting yourself from your brain, creating other avenues of distress and hallucinations. So you do that. And then the fourth thing would be that you would avoid flexing your muscles, avoid trying to move. And this is obvious given what I mentioned about, like, when you're trying to move, it can cause these hallucinations potentially. And also just when you try to move during REM sleep without this feedback from your limb, it can also feel like something is pressing on you, or it can feel like a spasmy feeling. Like something is like, oh, it doesn't feel right. It feels painful. And I've tried this many times in my own sleep paralysis. I will sometimes, just for fun, try to move a little bit, and then it feel like, oh, this hurts a bit, and this is because of this feedback coming back from your body, and this proprioceptive feedback as well. This is a dampening thing as well. It has dampening effect. All right, so avoid moving, avoid flexing your muscles, and don't overjudge your situation. And also, I mentioned during REM sleep you have rapid breathing, so automatically your breathing is like just naturally during the REM stage. And so when you try to control that, and that's natural, also very natural, when you wake up and you're like, let me control my breath. Why am I breathing like this? And then that will also feel like something is pressing on your chest. That's the whole thing about the ghost being on your chest. It's just your physiology, we think, it's going on. So going back to the therapy, you avoid moving your muscles, controlling your breath, focus on this positive thing. And then we say, keep your eyes closed during the entire thing, just to avoid you being affected by things in your environment. So this is the therapy in short that we found that was effective in a small group of narcolepsy patients in a pilot study. It was a very small study, and we found 50% reduction in sleep paralysis after applying this for about 8 weeks. Promising first step, but we need to do research. It's not enough. It's just a pilot study in small sample. So yeah, we've done that, and these sleep paralysis is fascinating. It's curious, and so many elements to it. So much richness to the experience, right? The fact that you go through these episodes where you're exposed to this fascinating world.
Definitely, sir. Yes. And now that all of us have got to know so much more about it, I think it's fascinating to each one of us in the meeting right now. So
Wonderful.
we had a couple of questions about dreams as well as consciousness. So let's
Mhm.
get started with them. So my first question would be that how does the stream of consciousness end and how do we go to sleep? How does that process happen exactly?
That's a good question. How do we go to sleep? Um, that's a big question. Like, what is going on exactly? How does consciousness occur? So let me tell you about the REM stages of sleep and what's going on during the REM and how we end up with the deep stage, right? So during, and this is important, it will sort of tie this together a little bit. Um, so when you are wakeful, your brain will be in the beta state of awareness. When you measure if you have an EEG, it's like you measure electrical activity on the scalp, you'll be in your brain will be very active. So you have this activity going on, right? But then as you go into the stage one of sleep, your brain slowly calms down, right? And then you would see that slowly the cortical regions will also be less active. So that's one key feature. And it will go into this alpha state, right? This is what's called alpha, where the activity is a bit different in the brain. Your brain is in a relaxed meditative state. It goes into that. And then it goes into the what's called you have these waves. Let me say let me remember this. It's been I tend to forget these things. It's the delta. You have the delta is the key. I'm forgetting right now. I have to let me look it up. But the thing is, you go into these stations. You go into beta, alpha, and then you go into the I forgot the stage, so we scratch the stage 3, and then you have the delta stages, which are these big ones, the big, and this is deep sleep. That's when you're deep sleep, your cortical neurons will fire and then stop firing, stop firing. Here you are in the deep stages of sleep, and then interestingly, you go into REM sleep, where you are in this. And this is interesting. So that the brain during REM is very much like in a wakeful person. It's very active. The neurons are firing away. So the neurons from the brain stem um, are sort of projecting out and creating all this activity in your cortex. And in fact, there was one theory at one point and this was from one of my previous I wouldn't say mentor, but Alan Hobson, which was a very well-known, famous dream researcher, who's saying, okay, well, look, during the REM stage, which is very, very much like the wakeful brain, all right, obviously you're not awake, your sensory system, right, your perceptual system is shut down, right, so you are sleeping, but you have a lot of activity, your brain is very active, and you have all these neurons from the lower part of your brain creating all this activity, and so your brain is trying to make sense of this, and might be a reason for why you're dreaming. Your brain have all this random activity coming back from the lower part of the brain and projecting out to the cortical regions. So that's in a nutshell. And then also it's important to bear in mind that that during the stages of sleep, the neurochemical environments are changing a bit. So during the REM stage, you have serotonin and noradrenaline being shut off, these two systems. These are important for alertness, for a sense of awareness and things like that, so you have these being shut off, but then you have acetylcholine being hyperactive. Short story is the neurochemical environment during REM sleep is of a certain kind. During deep sleep is a different kind, and during wakefulness is a different kind. During the various stages of sleep, your sensory system is shut off, and so did I answer your question, or did I, as a scientist, overcomplicate things? I hope it's kind of answers your.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you did add to what I was trying to ask. So, like, I've been paying attention to how I fall asleep each night. So
Yeah,
it starts with like me having a lot of thoughts about the day or just what all is stressing me up.
yeah,
Then the
yeah.
thoughts would become, oh, like there will be a lot of thoughts, and I will reach a point where I will be able to think about multiple things at the same time. and I
Mhm.
will be able to pay attention to each of them
Yeah,
almost equally. And I
yeah,
will reach a point when they start overlapping and they would start making no sense.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
there won't be any sense, but I would be able to think about it. And
yeah,
slowly, I would start thinking about something really absurd, start connecting two things which are not related. And that's when
yeah.
I feel like, oh, I have lost my consciousness.
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, what's going on? I mean, obviously, there's already a shift from the time you sort of start going into the alpha state. You'll see an activation of the visual cortex. So that's one of the first things that you'll see. You see an activation of the visual cortex when you sort of drift into sleep, and that's when you will. That's why people have what's called hypnagogic hallucinations. These are sleep onset hallucinations, just not sleep paralysis, even just like visions. And in fact, sometimes when I drift off to sleep, at the time when that occurs, I will have some visual imagery, being apparent. So you definitely have that. And then you mentioned, yeah, what else you mentioned? And so, yeah, that's a part of it, definitely.
Yeah, so that was how I felt that I fall asleep each night, that
Yeah.
there's overlapping of thoughts and then there are absurd connections, and then I feel like, oh, I have lost the consciousness. Yeah.
So when you say that REM sleep, the stage of REM sleep is the time when we have the most vivid imagery, can we
Yes.
also say that our duration of dreams also basically lasts till the time of our REM stage?
Say that again. Sorry.
So when you say that the REM stage of sleep
Yeah, yeah,
is basically the stage when we experience the most vivid imagery of all, so
yeah,
we
yeah,
can
yeah.
also say that right, that the duration of our dreams are also till the duration of the time we experience REM sleep as well.
So, yeah. So let me add, again. Let me, as a scientist, sort of unravel this in in a bit of a lengthy way. But so you have obviously these stages of sleep, and you have, let's say, during one night you have four stages, right? So you go through four blocks of all five stages of sleep. When I say four or five stages, it's a bit of a debate. Some say four, some say five. It depends on how you divide this, the stages, obviously. But let's say there are five stages, and you go through four blocks, and these are 90-minute blocks. Okay, so 90 minutes, 90 minutes, 90 minutes, 90 minutes, around, what is that, 8 hours or something, right? Assuming you sleep much, right? So you have these during the first stage, and you have only a little bit of REM sleep, not much. So your brain prioritizes what's called deep sleep, delta, the where you have the delta activity and the deep sleep part, and this part of the brain and this part of the of sleep is more important for sort of regeneration of your vascular system, your cells, your hormone release. Although you do have some of that stuff, hormone release in the REM stage, but you have more of that. It's a very important for just your overall well-being. House chores. It's taking care of all the house chores, your bodies, your cells, regenerating, all that stuff. You want to make sure that you're physically intact. So you have less of the a stage of sleep that's known as REM, where you have all these visual images and all that stuff. Although you can, to be frank, also have dreams in the other stages of sleep, including the deltas, the stage 4. All right, the deep sleep. It's also called slow wave sleep. Now, then, as the night advances, you will have more and more of the REM sleep. So you have more and more REM, and so it will have less of the delta, the slow wave sleep as you project on. But and so what his exact question was then? What was the exact question then?
Is the duration of our dreams
Yeah.
basically the same as the duration of our REM sleep?
I guess you wanted
Oh,
to
I
ask
see. I
that,
see. Sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
do we
You're right.
only dream during our REM?
Yeah, yeah. My apologies, and I didn't get much. It's relevant to the topic. I didn't get
Uh,
much sleep last night, so occasionally I have to ask you a few times before my brain can sort of absorb the information. It's just it's been a stressful month with a lot of deadlines. We have a lot of research deadlines. So last night was end of the month. Anyway, point being, yes. So REM sleep, you dream during the REM stage of sleep, and you dream during the entire REM stage of sleep, as far as we can tell. It seems like you'd be dreaming during the entire REM through the entire night. Now, of course, you only remember a few fragments of a few minutes during the final portion when you wake up. You see, it's only a few minutes, although you'd be sleeping the entire night. Now, Anindya, you might ask, how come, Baland? How come I'm not like why has my brain suppressed the information of all these dreams during the entire night, like all these hours of Hollywood blockbuster of me doing all these bizarre and weird things? Why my brain suppressing all this information? And the reason for this might be that dreams are extremely salient and powerful and meaningful. It's almost like you've taken LSD. It's like dreams are not just, they are very, very potent. They're very potent. And you wake up, when you want to go tell people, oh my God, I had this dream, and you want to just tell people, and people are like, what? This doesn't sound that interesting of you, being on having this weird experience of being on the moon. It's not that great. But for you personally, it's very, very important. So it seems like it's activating certain salient circuits in the brain. The self-meaning salience circuits, almost like spirituality circuits in the brain are being active. So you give it hyper meaning, super meaning, okay? So that is, but of course, and this is the key point, your brain seems to be suppressing this information because it would be overwhelmed if you could remember 8 hours of like you doing all these bizarre things during the whole night. It would be too much information. And so it's clever. It says, let me actually suppress the dreams so you don't have access to them. Otherwise, you'll probably go insane. In fact, it's been hypothesized that dreams, in the dream state, you activate a certain receptor called the serotonin 2A receptor, which is the same as receptor activated by LSD and psilocybin. So potentially in some parts of the brain, the dream, might be fueled by the overactivation, in fact, of this receptor, causing you to have LSD-like experiences, like surreal experiences. Now, Anindya, you might ask, what happens if you spontaneously have activation of these salient circuits during wakefulness? You might ask that, right? If you're awake and you have dream activation, these circuits in the brain that are active during dreams become active while you are walking down the, Oxford Street for the first time. What might happen? One argument is that is a déjà vu. A déjà vu is, in fact, you going to a castle, and your brain gets like, oh, for some reason, those dream circuits are activated, and so you give it a lot of salience, and my God, it's so meaningful, it's beautiful, it's cosmic, you see? You give it cosmic significance, and the only way your brain can deal with that, it says, oh, I must have been here before, even though it's impossible. So it's one explanation for that.
So it's like we are putting environmental context, basically. The context is what activates the feeling of deja vu.
Yeah, exactly. So the context is cueing your brain and says, oh, this is so significant that, it's almost like, maybe it's the artistic beauty or something about that experience that's activating these circuits, and they sort of start having a phasic burst, some kind of like a burst of activity and activating that circuit, and then your brain has to make a post hoc rationalization, like and say, oh, what is going on? My brain is hyperactive. This must mean I have been here before, or this, in a past life, or so you're trying to make sense of it. Your brain loves to make sense of things that is going on in that way. Another example, of temporal lobe epilepsy, right? So if you have epilepsy, spontaneous firing of neurons in the emotional part of the brain, like an attack of overactivation of those neurons, then also you will become hyper spiritual and hyper sort of cosmically inclined, and your brain will try to find a tangible way to make in the environment to make sense of, or in your life, in fact, to make sense of your neural activity. The short story is your brain often has a certain neurophysiology, and then you make rationalizations based on that mentally, psychologically. All right. So if you are sleeping in a cold room, and it's cold because your mom forgot to close the window, okay, or your roommate in college, and you're freezing, it's freezing cold, And then your brain, you have all this hypothermia, you're very cold. Your brain will say, how do I make sense of this? And then you find yourself dreaming being on Greenland, wrestling with an ice
Exactly.
bear up there, you see. So in that way, your environment and your environment's effect. So you have environment affecting your brain, and then you have psychological rationalization of that, if that makes sense.
So it's
There's a
kind
lot
of
of
like a cue dependent learning, which like increases this, like, which actually causes this incredible arousal in our brain, which is like very typical that when we take like drugs like LSD also, the
yeah.
effects are actually very similar.
It's a very similar thing. Yeah, the dream world is very much like that, right? So also think of the dream world as a world where everything is hyper connected, hyper connectivity of ideas, and it's almost like a synesthete, somebody with synesthesia. You know
Yes, sir.
synesthesia?
Yes,
I
sir.
do, yeah. Like when, yeah,
Yeah, it's where you have sensory modalities being over connected, and then you sort of you see
like
colors
when
when you
we
see
smell
that.
something, we imagine it was a color.
Yeah. Or
Yes. And
maybe if we see a number, if we imagine a color, something like
Yes.
that.
exactly, synesthesia, right? So synesthesia, you have like a dream is almost like that. It takes ideas, and then it's hypers connecting things in a mixed match. So it's almost like this bucket, and then you have all these ideas, and it hyper connects them. And actually, there's a weird thing about dream. There's a inclination to hyperconnect things that are very unrelated, almost like a schizophrenic person. You see, so it likes to take things that are strangely unconnected and link them instead of things that are actually connected. What do I mean? So if I present you two words like table and then present chair, you'll be faster at saying table, chair than if I present like table, city, okay, or table or honeymoon. Okay, these are not very connected. But if you wake somebody up from the REM stage and ask him these questions, he'll more likely to connect unconnected words. He's faster. It's almost like his brain is cued and primed to connect seemingly unconnected things. Hence, me being on the moon, having tea with the queen, and playing soccer with Messi, that world. And that is because your brain wants to connect. And then you might ask, you want to connect things that are unrelated. And then you might ask, Aditi, how come? Well, it seems like during the dream state, your brain is testing hypotheses. It says, oh, what happens if I take Balan and put him in this environment, and try this, and he's having tea with this person, and he's doing these things he could not do in reality. I'm going to put him there and have him experience that. How would he react to that? And then, depending on your reaction, it will teach you what is important, what is not important, what to avoid. And it will just, run these scripts of experimentation, making you more robust and strong if you encounter similar things in real life. So it allows you to do that, to run these virtual reality-like simulations in your brain and test new ideas and see what they mean to you, what emotional importance they have for you. Is that kind of clear?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we can also say that, right, the importance that because I also remember that I had read it somewhere that our problem solving abilities are enhanced, especially when we sleep well. So to what extent can a shortage of sleep actually like completely like destroy your problem solving abilities?
It's a very good question. So there's two questions I want to sort of infer from what you're saying. Number one is when you sleep and you get a good night of sleep, and I test you before that night on some kind of allow you to sort of play a piano. So you have you do that, and then test your skill ability, and then have you have a good night of sleep, especially the delta, the slow wave sleep is important here because that's where your motor circuits and your learning is being sort of consolidated and processed. And then you wake up the next day, you will be 20% better just by sleeping. All right. There's been a lot of these experiments showing that memory learning is enhanced significantly from sleeping. Okay. And a lot of this is occurring during the stage 4, the slow wave sleep that has to do with motor learning as well. A lot of these memory, putting your memory in the right places in your brain, all that is during that stage of sleep. Now, the emotional parts are more happening, during the REM stage, right? And also creativity, all right? Creativity. So there's a lot of creative processing during REM. REM is important for creative processing. So And you might ask, why, first of all? Well, I mentioned that the neurons producing noradrenaline, right? And its chemical cousin, adrenaline. You know, adrenaline is important for focusing on things.
Yes, sir.
These hormones and chemicals are being shut down during the REM dreaming state. And so you're less focused. You're less sort of honed in, you're less sort of precise, but your brain is more allowed to sort of wander around and be creative. That's why time, space, people are distorted, and it's all much more free floating, you see. And so it can potentially be a gateway to creativity and enhance creativity, perhaps having some REM sleep and some good dreams where you have that. Oh, by the way, I just thought of something. I mentioned the association between REM and dreams, and these are definitely, when you have REM, you dream during REM. And this is actually, there's been legion studies. So when people can no longer, you can dissociate, meaning there's a dissociation from these two states of dreaming, the subjective state of dreaming and of the REM sleep, meaning if you actually have no REM sleep, you can still dream. Or if you have, you can, so some argue, and it seems to be the case, that these stages co-occur, but they are not equivalent. So REM is one thing and dreaming is another thing. And there's a part of the brain known as the inferior parietal lobule. So it's a structure around this area. If you damage that region of the brain, you can no longer dream. Okay, you are unable to dream. And this part of the brain is important for conjuring up images and creating a sense of a sense of proportion in space, and creating a sense of a coherent world. That part of the brain is important for that. And so if that is lesion, there's a destruction to that part of the brain, well, then you cannot dream, but you can still have REM. But if I destroy the REM areas of the brain, and the brain stem, then you can lose REM, but you can still dream. So there's that dissociation that can occur. So that's another sort of important thing to mention, that these states seems to be co-occurring, but they're not perhaps totally the same, right, in that way, or dependent at least on each other.
Okay, yeah. So you're saying that during REM we dream a lot, but they may not be correlated.
Correct.
Okay, so this kind of reminds me of one of those times when I was on a fire asleep, and I would just think that, oh, I'm not able to dream enough. Maybe I'm not getting into my REM, and probably that's the reason I'm not getting the best rest, and that's why I'm not functioning my best. But maybe dreams and REM were not connected.
Well, the thing is, in a person without a lesion, so Aditi, you, definitely REM and dreaming would be, running together, right? But it shows you in patients with the lesions, though, that's when it's different. So no, for you and I, definitely, if you have REM, then you'll be dreaming during the REM stage. But you can dream during the other stages of sleep. So you might ask, now I'm asking the questions for you, okay? So you might ask, what kind of dreams might you have in the other stages of dreaming? And it turns out, dreams during especially the slow wave sleep, are less sort of, they don't have the intense lifelike crispness, right? So there's that element. They're less bizarre, they tend to be, you might see fragments of your daily life. So that's a bit different from the stage of sleep that's known as REM, where you can have sleep paralysis. But then you can ask, what happens if I wake up during one of these stages where you're not paralyzed? And can that even happen? And it turns out, yes. And you might wake up and start walking around an apartment out to the balcony and hurt yourself. This is known as sleepwalking. Or you might go and you see what I'm saying? So you might ask, like, why sleepwalk? You're paralyzed during dreams or dreams. How come you sleepwalk? Well, sleepwalking occurs during another stage of sleep, potentially the slow wave sleep and the whole non-REM, non-paralyzed stage of sleep. There are other interesting arousal parasomnias that occur during the non-REM stage where you're not paralyzed. So it could be the sleep eating disorders, where you go out to the kitchen and you're asleep, you walk around, you're asleep, and then you start preparing food, chopping food up, chuck, 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 chuck. You're sleeping, my God, with a kitchen knife, imagine, okay? and you cut the food and you start eating it, and it's frozen. Even frozen food you eat, or you dog food, or pet food you eat. Okay, you have a preference towards carbohydrate, perhaps a biological, adaptive reason for that. So you'd eat all these foods, and then
There's sleep talking as well, where people talk in their sleep.
talking. Yes, sleep talking
Also,
and
I have heard that at some occasions it's rare, but in sleepwalking, sometimes when you like try to wake that person, they tend to lash out.
Yeah, they get really scared and
yeah,
they might
yeah,
attack you.
certainly, yeah. These episodes, you're already aroused in that manner, and having this nocturnal sleep arousal occurring, so you don't want to wake somebody up
It's
during
like
that.
it induces a threat response like immediately, sort of.
Sure. Yeah, it's a bit tricky. You want to be careful, certainly. I mean, I've not had anybody, to be frank, I've not had experienced anybody sleep, but I do have, sleepwalking in front of me. But I've seen sleep, like sleep talking and things like that. And did you have that before? And then you wake them up and they fall
Yes, yes.
aroused, and you want to be
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
careful with it. But yeah,
My
I mean,
mother, so whenever I used to sleep with my mother, at times she would say that you woke up last night and you said something absurd. Like, so when I was learning a new language, I woke up and spoke to her in that language and went back to sleep, which I have no memory about.
Exactly. Like sometimes even I do. Like when I sleep, there are a couple of occasions when I wake up and I raise my hand and I say something, but then I just sort of get aware that why am I even doing something like this?
absolutely, no. It's fascinating. My brother, when we grew up in, I'm originally Kurdish from Iraq. My brother, sometimes we go in the summer, we go back to that region. And my brother, when he was a kid, over there, like India, it's very hot, and especially in the summer, it's very hot. So they sleep on the sort of the roof. There's like a place where you sleep, and it's dangerous if you're not careful. If you wake up and start, sleepwalking there. So um, he woke up one night and started to play soccer, while sleeping on the roof. My mom tells me this. I wasn't with him on that occasion, but yeah, it's interesting. These and or people driving it, going out and driving their Tesla on the freeway. Or not even forget Tesla. I mean, Tesla is good if you can drive a Tesla because it can drive itself, but they will drive their regular car even, on the freeway. And how does your brain do that? It just shows you how interesting the
Like
brain is.
we can call it a kind of conditioning that maybe somewhere our brains like accustomed that okay, you know how to drive a car, but since we are not seeing, it's like this very weird dissociation between what we're actually the phase of consciousness that we are in and the
Yeah.
phase of consciousness that our body interprets it to be.
Or maybe it's more like since we are making new connections, our brain wants to test them out, and that's right when it does that.
That is true, but at the same time, the fact that you can that you're not aware, that you're not awake, you don't have that attentional focus. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? It's quite something, right? But the brain is fascinating, and it works in various layers. It has layers by which it operates. It's not that this uniform thing. I mean, I'm talking about consciousness and awareness. So give me an example. Give you an example here. So I've had a dream where, and this is actually several times. I was chatting with this guy next to me. I had a good conversation. Presumably this guy must have been me, of course. He was sitting there, and he tells me a joke. Okay, a very funny joke, very interesting, and I start laughing. I go ha ha ha. To the extent that I wake myself up from laughter. Okay, really, this happened to me. I start waking myself up from laughter from this joke. But then I asked myself as a scientist, I say, how come I found the joke so funny? Because jokes are only funny when you know the joke. I mean, that's the whole point. You have a storyline. This is the point of joke. You have a storyline, and then you have the punchline itself. And then if you know this story, if you know the punchline, the joke is not funny, right? It's not funny anymore. The joke told second time that you won't laugh. But somehow my breast, so my dreaming self was suppress the information of the joke to make it funny to me. You see, and it shows you how the brain works in these mysterious layers that it can, in certain situation, really suppress information and make it partially available to you in order to make you laugh. So It's quite the thing how the brain has these, it works in these ways. Does that make sense? Did you have similar
Yes,
dreams?
absolutely,
It
absolutely.
does,
I
yeah.
think both all of us are so overwhelmed by the amount of information we know about ourselves and our dreams right now. So
And it's such a curious topic, actually, also that sleep is a thing which we don't really know much about because we are not even consciously aware. So we wake up and we are like, okay, nothing has happened. But there's a lot of things happening. And
exactly,
that's the
and
most
we spend
interesting
so
part.
much time sleeping throughout our lives. It must be super important.
Yeah, we spend about one third of our lives sleeping. So this you might ask why. I mean, it certainly would make more sense to spend some of this energy, spend time that you're given, precious time, to go and hunt for, predator, basically as a predator, go out and get some food, to bring back to your tribe and eat it. I'm thinking the prehistoric man, right? So it wouldn't make sense for him to put himself in this very vulnerable state where animals could eat him up. Why would he do that? Well, it shows you, first of all, there must be a critical key thing for why we spend so much of the 24-hour clock, right, on sleep.
The advantages must outweigh the disadvantages.
Yeah, yes, and it's a big cost. It's a big cost, and that's the thing. It's a big cost of time, and that could be spent on just, propelling your genes to the next generation by doing other things. But yet you are spending all this time. So it must be important for conscious awareness, consciousness. Obviously there's all these immune function aspects and all that, but the fact that it's so important it's still interesting. It's very interesting, and it shows you there's something going on. And I think exploring really the dream world per se is also a key way of understanding how awareness and consciousness arises, in the brain and things like that. So I think the dream world is per se not only sleeping but dreams. The fact that your brain puts so much emphasis on dreams. There's so much to explore there in terms of your waking consciousness, and you know.
Definitely, sir. Yeah. So I think I have one last question and we will wrap up the session. So this
Sure.
question arises from my own observation that I have seen you be doing a lot of outreach. I have seen you doing a lot of science communication, and you have been extremely interested in reaching out to people and young minds and creating awareness about
Thank
sleep,
you.
brain, and your field of work. So I
Yeah,
wanted to ask you, what's your motivation and why do you want to do it so much?
it's a great question, Aditi. I'd like to inspire young people. I'd like to reach out to people. I don't have to do this, of course. But given my background, where I grew up in a tough neighborhood, growing up in Copenhagen, yeah, as a refugee coming to Europe. I didn't have a lot of opportunities in front of me, but yet through blessings, of course, and not myself, but mentors and serendipitous events in my life, I was able to be where I am today. And so my goal was with my outreach, especially when it's outreach like this caliber, where it's people from India, a completely different culture than the one that I'm presently at. My hope is to inspire. Maybe there's a Ramanujan hiding behind one of these screen, on sort of a hidden gem that might one day have big impact on the world of science. And if not, maybe he can still do some important work to help his community through applications of psychiatry and all this stuff. So my short answer is, my hope is to help others, inspire them like I was helped and inspired. So that's what motivates me, as a scientist, to do this work, this outreach work.
That's a very beautiful answer, sir. Thank you so much.
It's like one of those answers when you win the Oscars, and you have to give this world peace, speech. But no, I mean it seriously. I'd like to inspire others. I hope I can give back, and it's a special thing when it comes from communities that like my own one was is not necessarily it's a different culture and you. So is this your guys? You're studying chemistry, right, over there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, neurochemistry and chemistry. Very good, excellent. Well, great job on the questions. Appreciated it. So
Thank you so
thank you.
much, sir. Now, I would like to ask our audience if someone's interested, they can just hop in and ask their questions to you.
Or if you're not feeling comfortable with asking individually, you can also put it up in the chat box. And yeah.
Whatever is easiest.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we would like to thank you from the deepest cores of our heart for coming and turning up today and inspiring us so much and telling us so much more about sleep and sleep paralysis and whatnot. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, thank you. No, always is my pleasure. Always happy.
I think myself and I think every single person in the talk was highly hooked during the session, which actually indicates, which actually reflects how much you are interested in your field, that you talk so much passionately about
Thank you.
what you always
Or
talk.
your field.
Yes, sir. Yeah, your passions really shows up.
Well, that is the most most interesting thing in science. I think definitely it's fascinating. Fascinating.
Thank you so much for the great. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, Bhavna,
Thank you so much for the great talk, sir. I have a question. So, there are times when your body is extremely exhausted, but your mind is hyperactive, and there are times when your mind is really exhausted, but your body still has the capacity to go about. So, falling asleep during these two cases is different. Like the mechanism of falling asleep has it has a different series of events when for each of these cases.
It's a very good question, and the answer is yes, definitely. If you are tired and especially if you're deprived of REM sleep, then your brain will be starved for REM, and you will just jump into REM much more faster. You see, and that can actually result in a sleep paralysis episode. In fact, so yes, it happens to me as well. I'm physically very tired. I maybe had a few days of little sleep, like the past few days. Okay, and so I go to sleep, and my brain will like, oh my God, let me take Balan and put him into REM quickly. We need some emotional, repair here. We need the REM stage to. So you can have these. The answer to your question, Bhavana, if it's correctly pronounced. Yes, you can. These stages are not completely fixed, and depending on how tired you are, your various physiology, this architecture, you see, of sleep can be changed, and you can go faster into your stage versus the other. And in fact, this is a key point as well. If you have like emotional issues, if you are depressed, for example, if you have depression, like the REM stage will intrude into the first stage of sleep and take away from the whole slow wave sleep stage. So in other words, the stage of sleep that is important for like a bodily repair, just to overly simplify it, that will be deprioritized, and you will just have a lot of REM sleep early in the night. Instead of having like a few minutes in the first phase, you will have a lot of REM, because that stage is important for emotional repair. So this is depressed people. Now, what do you think might be the result of that if you don't have a lot of the motor, going on, the motor repair and all the other stuff, and the memory part's not working in that stage? Then you will have less energy because you didn't have that deep sleep, you see. So it's a compromise in that case. Long answer to your your precise question is yes, definitely. This can happen. So, but yeah, that's what my long-winded answer to that.
So the physical recovery and regeneration does not take place in such a situation, right?
In such a situation, you have less of that. That's why, people with depression will tell you, I have very little energy. I feel like my body's sore, the muscles, I'm not completely, feeling right. And that's because your brain said, the hell with deep sleep now. I'm going to just repair these emotions that's leading me to have cortisol, being elevated the entire night. This must be immediately repaired. So your body, says, doesn't, so you have that, as you say, Bhavana. That's right. And but yeah, it comes at that price, that you have very low energy, often, and things like that. So yes.
So I have.
So one more. Sorry,
Sorry,
sorry.
Bhavna. Yeah,
No
continue.
problem. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Bhavna, you can go ahead with your question. No issues. We can wait.
Okay. So does your research also involve what certain type of, so we all see a series of images in our dreams, right? So those images have a particular meaning or something like that? Is there some sort of, research on that as well? Does your research touch that area?
Well, my research is mostly on sleep paralysis and that dreaming element of sleep paralysis itself, but just extrapolating from that, and just, or the literature on dreams, the scientific studies on dreams, is definitely, yes, your dream imagery and what you see in your sleep is definitely tainted, if not like generated based on your memories and all the things you do in your life. And that's why you take images and you sort of have them present that are in a way that is according to your environment. So if you take an extreme case of a Martian who's lived on Mars, the planet Mars in his entire life, he wouldn't dream of things from Earth, you see. So it's, yes, these are the images that we sort of have been exposed to during our entire life that are shown up in dreams. But then you can say, but how about somebody, and this is going me off tangent a bit, but forgive me, I have to mention, but what about Ramanujan, since we are talking to Indians? Yeah, he would actually see a lot of his equations in his dreams, equations that were hitherto unknown. So he wasn't exposed to this, but he would see these equations and answers to deep mathematical, questions that have influenced math to this day. Today, so the question might be, and this is relevant, Bhavana, is that can you then brain create completely novel things, right? Like these math equations, or what about a person that is stunningly beautiful, right? So if you see somebody that if you had seen them in real life, you'd have remembered, yet you see them in your dream. How is that person? Was that a new person, or was that a person that I saw before? It's an unanswered question, but most likely it was a person that you had seen before, and your brain cannot completely regenerate novel images, but it can sort of mix and match, match from your exposures. But I think these are still open questions to some extent. But
Okay, so I have one more question related to this. So a lot of people commonly dream about, falling off a cliff, or like, falling down the stairs or something like that. And usually it has a very generic meaning when you go ahead and, search this on the internet. But this could also have a subjective meaning, right? I mean, for different people, it could mean different things, right?
like falling down like a cliff or something like that, what it means? Yeah, so the question is falling off a cliff. You see, there is this common thing known as a hypnagogic jerk, right? Meaning, or like this feeling of falling when you fall asleep, when you feel like, oh my God, I'm falling. Or it can also be like seeing yourself falling as an image, a dreamlike image. There is that. And then, of course, there's an actual dream of you being on a place and falling down. One possible explanation for this is that, human beings used to live on treetops. And there was also always a potentiality or possibility of them falling down. So they had to keep some level of alertness, and maybe some of those fragments have carried over to our, this state, they have, in this age where we don't typically, sleep on high places like that. So that could be a possibility, but yeah, I think that is a part of it. And I think also, given that human beings, tends to used to climb trees and occasionally live, having to resort to trees when they were being haunted, or predators, or mountaintops, going on to high mountains that were dangerous. So dreaming about these and reenacting scenarios like that would make you more likely to potentially strengthen brain circuits that has to do with mountain climbing or potentially falling, and allowing you to be more building a sort of preparedness for it. So that's another possibility, going from the dreams of idea of sort of why we dream and stuff. Hope that makes sense. Let's do one more question, then otherwise I'm gonna fall asleep. It's been, as I said, I'm super tired. So let's do one more. But I really appreciate your very sharp question, Pavana. You have some very good question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. One more question. So which one?
So I guess we can wrap it up by just extending to what you just said, that boredom induces sleep. And
Yeah.
even though you're in a very even though you're getting a lot of information, but if you're bored in a class or if you're bored in a situation, you fall asleep. What could be the reason behind it?
The reason is probably, and it's again, you're going to be a long-winded answer. You're asking a scientist, a neuroscientist, about why we have these. For learning, you need a lot of. One thing you need for learning is dopamine, right? So if things are interesting and they have a potential reward value or things like that, you tend to hone in and focus in more on those kind of things. So that is an important component of this, and. So yeah, I think you are more, obviously your visual centers, your brain, right, will be more aroused. By visual, I don't mean actual literal, like, so more like attentional, focus. If it's on something that's salient, it means that here's a potential reward. What's going on, right? In just take it really crudely, and this is just a very basic example. If you saw and this is why your brain prefer. That's why when I talk, I often have these movements. But your brain actually prefer moving objects, for example, just as one element of the whole thing of why your brain your brain likes moving objects. Why would it like that? Why is the dopamine neurons tickled by more moving object versus non-moving object? Well, the thing is that in nature, whenever an object was moving, it meant either this is a predator or it's a prey, it's a predator, it's something, it's a living creature. Usually it's living creatures that moves around, you see. So it's either a potential for escape or a reward, like something, it's even a mate. So I have to go pursue this mate, it's moving. So it has all these, so your brain has this bias towards moving object and it captures attentional focus. In fact, and here's another layer. Your brain also, and this is going a bit off tangent again, but your brain loves symmetry, like the Taj Mahal. Why does your brain love the Taj Mahal? That the guy made for his beloved. The beautiful symmetrical thing. Well, it turns out in nature, again, everything that's living, an animate object, is symmetrical. It has symmetry. So your brain, whenever it sees a symmetrical Picasso image or something like a piece of art or the Taj Mahal, your brain, the neurons are fooled. They go, my God, this must be a living animate object, meaning there's some reward, mate, a potential food source. And so your dopamine neurons are, tantalized by this, and then you find it more attractive. Your attention goes towards it. So symmetry, movement, we like, and then also probably you're asking, why are we aroused by people being excited and passionate when they give a talk, like Baland, right? And the answer might be that you look at me and you see my emotional state. And to some extent, there's some syncing going on between your emotional state and the other persons you're watching.
Oh, because of the mirror neurons.
Well, mirror neurons could be some kind of neural system that has to do with mirroring. So it could
Also
be
based on the principles of symmetry and continuity that you said, just all principles in a sense. So somewhere our brains.
This is exactly the Gestalt principle. In terms of the other aspect of subjective in syncing in with another person is because you look at his state and he says, oh, he's aroused, he's passionate. He must have access to some food source that I don't have access to. He's so happy, his dopamine neurons are firing away. So let me listen to him attentively so I can get the information for myself and go and get that for myself.
So like an evolutionary advantage, basically. That's what our brains always geared towards. And it also affects our sleep and our nature of dreams, everything.
Everything is embedded in your adaptive advantages, how your brain can secure its own survival. Always. This is always a ongoing theme in the brain. It's always about how do I secure my survival? How do I get predator? How do I avoid predators? How can I mate? How can I do all these things? And so your brain is using these shorthand circuits, and occasionally it cannot differentiate between the Taj Mahal, which cannot resemble anything in nature, but it thinks, oh my God, this is a huge animate object, of immense beauty and elegance, and so you find it beautiful, and your brain doesn't even know why it's so beautiful. But here's a potential reason is that your brain is, loves symmetry. So I hope that again was a very long answer to your question, but I hope maybe it aroused your curiosity a bit, and yeah.
Yes, sir, absolutely. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
yes, sir. So I would hand over Anindya to present the vote of thanks and wrap up the session here.
Okay, so that was a very interesting talk. First of all, like a great thanks from our behalf to you for actually
Thanks.
taking out the valuable time to
Pleasure.
share your knowledge with us. And also, I would like to express my gratitude to the director of the College of Integrated Studies, Professor B.V. Sharma, and associate director of our college, Professor Salman Abdul Moez, for providing us with the needed opportunity and support to organize this talk. I'm also very grateful to all the Junior Science Club faculty coordinators for their constant presence and guidance. And my big thanks to CIS, all our seniors and fellow student coordinators with the JSC, and most importantly, our dear audience for participating with such enthusiasm and patience. So thanks everyone for making this event successful with your contribution. And with this, we can end this talk. And again, a big thanks to you, sir. This has been like one of the most creative and informative sessions that we have ever had in
Yes,
our
yes,
science club.
definitely.
We all enjoyed it thoroughly.
Wonderful. I'm so happy. Thank you so much. And I want to give a special thank to Aditi. She's helping me with so much work. She's doing such great stuff. And, so I want to thank you especially for all the help you're providing me and as a student and as a upcoming researcher. And thank you so much for listening in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, sir. I just like you, I am really passionate about science and communicating science. Just to mention, tomorrow is National Science Day in India. Yeah, so it was a great occasion to have you and your talk just before National Science Day.
And it's also something that we as people who are aspiring to actually do research in the field of psychology and sleep and consciousness is such an interesting part of it. So it somewhere also fills us with inspiration that that we get an idea of what do we have to do generally, So
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, neuroscience and science is fascinating. There's so many things we need to figure out, and going from small molecules that can cause us to see ghosts to why we find Picasso so beautiful. All these answers, and so yeah, it's fantastic. So thank you so much.